father of those other calves to Tucson, Arizona, with a couple of the females and their kids. So now we've got the remaining females here, and then we brought Nasholo, who was one of the elephants that went to Florida, and brought him here to help mix up the gene pool a little bit. He still hasn't sired any calves yet, but he is definitely trying. So as you can see here, we've got a full training session going on with Njula and Rudy. This is her son, and her trainer, Laura, and then our other trainer, Lauren. That gets confusing sometimes. So here's a nice view of the elephant. One of the best views, I think. We always like to make sure that our elephants get a nice little limbering up before we do our show. Oh, starting with the showstopper. A cute little hat. So we have our trainers on one side and our elephants on the other. And we actually never go into the enclosure with our elephants. We're always separated by some sort of barrier, and here it's cables, sometimes it's bars. So there's always some sort of protected contact. So despite the fact that there's always some barrier, you can clearly see that we have really good physical contact with it. And we do that by asking them to present different parts of their body. And how we do that is through positive reinforcement training. So I'm sure if any of you guys have ever taken a psychology class, you've heard of operant conditioning. Oh, someone left the ball in the arena. Your mom. I'm like, whatever. You want that? So we use that positive reinforcement, and so it's part of operant conditioning, and there's lots of different parts of operant conditioning, but the type that we use uses positive reinforcement. So we have this wonderful food that they love. What do you guys think it is that we're feeding these elephants? I heard carrots, peanuts. Well, actually, even though the pellets that we feed them look a lot like peanuts, it's actually very similar to a rabbit pellet. So it's compressed alfalfa hay, but it's perfectly formulated for an elephant. We actually have a company that makes all different kinds of foods in pellet form for different kinds of animals, depending on what their needs are. So that company will make it specifically for elephants or any kind of wild herbivore. So this one is specifically formulated for them, and they adore those things. The pellet is probably their favorite reinforcement item, and they are happy to do all sorts of behaviors for that reinforcement. So you can see that we're kind of using our body language, and we also are using our voice. So you might not be able to hear very well, but you can see that we're using hand gestures, and we use our voice as well. So we get them to present different parts of their body. There's a nice foot present. And when they do it properly, they hear a little bridge. And so this is our high-pitched whistle bridge. But we also can use a tactile bridge, and tactile touch. So we use a triple tap. And that also indicates that the behavior was done correctly. So it's a really good way for us to pinpoint, and the reason why it's called a bridge is because it pinpoints the moment that the behavior was done correctly and the time that they get reinforcement. So they know they're going to get reinforcement, it just bridges that time so that they know exactly what they got reinforced for. So we're pinpointing it by bridging in the moment that they're doing exactly what we want. And it's called a terminal bridge because they are supposed to terminate the behavior as soon as they hear it. So they have their foot up there and they're doing really good holding still while we file. Then they hear that bridge, they come out of it, and then they get reinforced. So we can build on all different kinds of behaviors, and the very first thing we usually train is just for them to touch their trunk to our hand. She was getting really excited about that head-shaped yes. And it is extremely adorable, but it wasn't what Lauren asked for. So you can see that Lauren didn't get upset, she didn't jump up and down or get frustrated. She actually just stood there. So the way that we indicate to our elephants that they weren't doing what we asked is to actually do nothing. So if we ask for her to present her foot, and she does a head shake yes instead, we'll kind of just drop our hands and stand there for about 3 seconds and just indicate that what they just did wasn't reinforceable. So it's more for us to make sure that we're not giving them any kind of indication fast and that they're not going to get any reinforcement for doing incorrect behavior. Usually they just come out of it and look at us and we ask them for the behavior again, or sometimes we can move on. And if you're getting a little frustrated or confused or not paying attention, sometimes you get a little lazy or sluggish. So sometimes we can move on completely, and if it's really bad, we can even do a timeout. So a timeout is just us moving ourselves away from the situation so they're not getting reinforced for their behavior. And then once they start, once we've waited for a little bit of time, then we'll come back and start over. Usually it kind of just freshens their mind up and lets them